Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what is making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Sarah Vine. Welcome and great to see both of you. Front pages, though, first of all, let's start with the Metro, paying tribute to the late comedian and presenter Paul O'Grady, saying thanks for all the joy, Paul. That is also the lead story for tomorrow's Sun, as it says goodbye to Paul and his character, Lily Savage. The Telegraph says that householders are to be penalised by the government through their energy bills if they refuse to switch away from using gas in the drive towards net zero. The Express reports that the government is to abandon plans to raise the state pension age to 68 for fear of alienating middle-aged voters. According to the Eye, Rishi Sunak is facing allegations of a conflict of interest after it emerged that a childcare firm in which his wife has shares stands to benefit from his recently announced budget. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister has insisted the ministerial code was followed in addressing the matter. The Guardian says the government is going against expert advice by using so-called carbon capture technology, where carbon dioxide is acquired and stored underwater to allow an expansion of North Sea oil and gas. The Daily Mail leads with a new study claiming that so-called gender ideology in schools is putting children at risk. The FT has news that Sergio Ermotti, the former chief executive of the investment bank UBS, has been reappointed to the job in an effort to ensure its takeover of the troubled Credit Suisse goes smoothly. And the Star, wait for it, says the Sun is falling to bits. They don't mean their Fleet Street rival. And it could have an impact, bizarrely, on Friday, I read. Anyway, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. While you watch our guests, let's head straight to Kevin Maguire and Sarah Vine. And we start with warnings about AI. Front page of the Financial Times, Sarah. Musk and 1,000 others are deeply concerned about its impact on society and humanity. This is absolutely fascinating.
Well, I think this is a story that's been sort of rumbling around for a bit, and it sort of seems to have crystallised in this announcement by Musk. I mean, he's got a lot of people on side. He's got the guy from Apple, the co-founder of Apple, whose name obviously I forget because I'm not a bot. If I were a bot, I would know it. And he's but the idea that ChatGPT, which is this sort of AI program that all my daughter's university friends are already using to write their essays, it's really terrifying technology in the sense that I think it was I can't remember which bank it was. I think it was Deutsche Bank said that they thought it would make sort of 300,000 people in their business unemployed. I mean, it could have a really huge social impact, because if it supersedes humans in doing these sort of tasks, then what are we going to do for the rest of our lives? How are we going to survive? And I think Elon Musk is actually quite right to step forward and sound a warning about it and say, we need a kind of considered approach to this, and how far are we going to let this go? And he says that a lot of the technology is not really properly controlled, and that because there's such a sort of desperate race to come up with the best bit of technology, that some companies are playing rather fast and loose with it.
Yes, and listening to experts about this, that the fear is partly that it can unpick our language, which has taken thousands of years to develop. It can also expose our weaknesses, which we're still trying to cover up ourselves, I suppose. And bad actors could use this in terms of issues like security or deep fakes, stirring up public mood, etc. And I see by one AI journalist I follow on Twitter that more than 360 new AI tools were released in just the last 7 days, Kevin. So this is an enormous field, is it not?
Yeah, massive and growing, and possibly too little scrutiny in general up until now. I've got to get over my suspicion of Elon Musk, who always tries to resist regulation when it impacts on him, whether it's Tesla or Twitter and his own commercial interests. So there is some rivalry here. However, who controls, operates, and benefits from AI is of crucial importance to us all. Otherwise, it is very possible we'll all just end up being manipulated and controlled by it, and whoever actually runs it. And the story of the Industrial Revolution, of course, is technical change, all the time, very, very constant. But is this just a giant leap, so much bigger than many, many before? And there has been so little debate and what regulation is there, not just in the US, but UK and around the globe. So a pause, it sounds kind of sensible, doesn't it? As you take, you take stock and where are we and what safeguards would be needed, what use could it be put to that's in the general public good rather than the commercial interest or the security interest or whatever the interest of those who control it.
I mean, I think the thing.
Go on, Sarah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I mean, we've seen with social media what happens when there's zero regulation. I mean, so much of the sort of bad stuff that has happened in recent years, free to view hardcore porn, bullying, cyberbullying, all, the things that we are all really uncomfortable with have all been to do with unregulated, that space being completely unregulated. But I think this AI thing has the potential to make that look like a walk in the park.
Yes, and I mean, ironically, this comes as the government launches its AI white paper to guide the use of artificial intelligence in the UK to drive responsible innovation and maintain public trust in this revolutionary technology. And certainly we've heard, defence of it in terms of medical advancements, which could be absolutely critical. But I think everyone's, feeling slightly nervous if you watch what the latest AI systems can do. As you said, writing essays is just the tiny part of it, isn't it? But let's move on to The Guardian. An announcement we're expecting on Thursday by Grant Shapps, Energy and Net Zero Secretary, revealing the Powering Up Britain strategy with carbon capture and storage at its heart. He'll be visiting a nuclear fusion development facility in Oxford. And The Guardian suggests there are concerns about this then, Kevin.
Yeah, according to The Guardian, Grant Shapps will say the government's going to spend 20 billion over 20 years on capturing carbon to store it in undersea caverns so we can exploit more oil and gas fields. There's been talk of carbon capture, certainly going back to the 70s, and I can remember because it used to be then in relation to the coal industry, which has essentially been shut down since. But it seems to me the government wants to expand North Sea production of oil and gas, new fields. But at the same time, it's got international commitments on the environment and reducing the amount of carbon. And this seems to be its answer. Whether it works or not, of course, is where the great debate will be.
Yes, it feels.
I think it's probably just better if we get ourselves off carbon fuels as quickly as possible.
Yes, and after the UK was host of the COP26 summit in Glasgow, put huge amounts of effort into that. It's all gone slightly off the boil, presumably because of the Ukraine war and the energy crisis, and therefore the drive for domestic, production of energy. But does the government need to do more and start to focus? And what can we expect to see in terms of net zero? Certainly the Telegraph's talking about being penalised, households being penalised for using gas in the future.
I mean, those are sort of contrasting messages, really, aren't they? On the one hand, we're going to do carbon capture so that we can carry on using gas. And then on the other hand, we're going to be fined if we carry on using gas. So I think there needs to be perhaps a little bit more joined up thinking on this. I mean, I think the thing about this situation is that we're sort of in uncharted territory. And so a lot of it is experimental and new and different. And we don't know what, if anything, is going to work. There obviously isn't a silver bullet. So they need to have a finger in many pies and follow the whatever gets the results that we need to get in terms of net zero needs to be done more of. But it's difficult. It's very difficult, and I do think the public do get conflicting messages.
Yes, the Telegraph saying ministers are planning to overhaul subsidy rules so that gas is relatively less attractive compared with electricity to try to drive the uptake of green power and hasten the end of fossil fuels. Electricity regarded as greener because of its renewables element, certainly. Let's go on to the Express, Kevin. Lots of different papers with different leads tonight, as we can see. Now, we've seen what's happened in France, haven't we? But the plan to get us to retire at 68 looks like being shelved.
Yeah, and I think this is an easier up and down story rather than AI and carbon capture, because of course there's a general election looming next year. And Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary, said now is not the time to raise retirement age, the retirement age again. It's going up to 67 by 2028, 68 within 12 years, and talk of it going up again after that. I would have thought with an election looming and older people vote, or people thinking of retirement tend to vote more than those who are young, and the government's just given £1 billion to the very richest pensioners. I would have thought announcing you're going to raise the retirement age for everybody else ain't going to go down well. But it's worth noting the French are on the streets cancelling Charlie's visit, setting buildings alight, smashing windows, over a rise from 62 to 64. So they've got it good compared to us in the UK.
Well, they say that's the minimum, and many work for longer. There's all sorts of arguments on the streets of Paris and elsewhere. But certainly the state pension age was scheduled to rise to 68 by 2046. Mr Hunt had been hoping to bring forward the increase to the end of the 2030s, as recommended by an independent review in 2017. And many people are feeling, Sarah, that actually the growth in our longevity has stalled, and therefore perhaps it's not necessary effectively.
And I think the retirement age is a really interesting idea, because I think if you do manual labour, then I don't see how you can possibly carry on working until the age of 67. I mean, I'm 55 and I'm exhausted already. So and I don't do manual labour. So I think there are different types of professions require different retirement ages. I mean, the judges. I mean, I think all our judges are about 900 years old, aren't they? They seem to never retire. I think that it's an emotive subject. I think a lot of people feel that, they're worried about retiring, they're worried about not having enough money, they're worried about their pension not covering the cost of living, etc., etc. I think a sort of slightly sort of tin-eared, we must increase the retirement age is just not going to work for the public. I can't see how it would please anybody.
With a pension, what it's really about is when you qualify for your state pension. So every time the government raises it a year, you basically lose £9,500 or whatever it'll be when you finally get there. Because in the private sector or elsewhere, there is no compulsory retirement age now, because that will be age discrimination. But being able to get that state pension is a goal for some people when they think they can actually stop working. But Sarah again raises a very interesting point. It's almost an economic class issue on, say, manual workers and white-collar workers. It's because well-off people live about 10 years longer than the poorest. So there is actually a case for the state pension to kick in according to your economic class and the job you do. And if you're a manual worker, a blue-collar worker, you should be able to get your pension earlier than somebody who's a white-collar worker, because those who are living 10 years longer, better off, they're getting their pension for an extra 10 years. That must be about an extra $100,000. While the poor manual workers are just about to qualify, and they live a few years and then they're dead, so they don't get to enjoy it. So I think it's the system at the moment actually benefits the better off.
Yes, and well, notwithstanding that, the pandemic and other matters, it is suggested, means that how long we live has gone down. So a man born in 1971, now expected to live to 83.9 years, down from 85.6, and a woman to 86.7, down from 88.1. So that's quite a significant fall, isn't it, in our... What's the opposite of mortality? Anyway, you know
longevity.
That word. Thank you very much. Yes, that'll do for now. Anyway, no doubt we'll hear more about that. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Oh dear, it's late. The words go. Coming up, we will take a look at many of the tributes to the late comedian and presenter Paul O'Grady. There we are. Back in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Kevin Maguire and Sarah Vine. Tributes, Kevin, all over the newspapers to Lily Savage, Paul O'Grady, and genuine sadness because he provided such joyful as you listen to him, don't you think?
Oh, no, absolutely. No one has a bad word for him, only a good word, because he was incredibly sharp. He was really funny, a terrific, nice guy who was very generous with other people, a huge heart. And he also campaigned, he cared. And of course, he was campaigning for LGBT rights. He was wanting a police apology for that raid on the Vauxhall Tavern in 1987, and his programmes about dogs and cats too won him wide appeal. Now, at 67, when I woke up and saw he died, I really felt sad, very, very sad. He's a wonderful bloke, and he will be really, really missed. And only 67, that's no age.
And Sarah, you were saying you had the privilege of seeing Paul O'Grady on the student circuit back in the day, and the Sun pointing out that he's a star twice over with his his personality of Lily Savage, and then himself.
Yeah, but he was. I mean, I used to see him a lot in the 80s. I used to go to lots of comedy clubs, and he was brilliant. But he was also really unique. I mean, nobody was doing that sort of thing back then, and he did it with such sort of gusto. And you'd go to clubs, and you could see that there were a few people who were a bit, what's this? I'm not sure about this. And within sort of 3 minutes, he would have the meeting out of his hand. And he had that brilliant sort of old-fashioned comic thing, which is that he was a kind of equal opportunities, rude about everybody. So everybody got a little bit of a tongue lashing. And so that was fine. And he was incredibly bright as well. That's the other thing to say, is that he was just a real sharp cookie. And of course, that's why he was so successful. But like Kevin says, in 67, I think he had a bit of a dicky heart, didn't he? I think he'd had a few problems. So I don't know whether that was what, but it does, you do think when you're talking about the retirement age of 68, it's not great, is it?
No, absolutely. But so many tributes, certainly, to Paul O'Grady. Let's move on to the picture story that the Daily Telegraph has chosen. Many, of course, chosen Paul, but they've chosen the King on his first state visit to Germany, obviously not France, for the reasons we all know, that it was cancelled, that bit of it. And here he is pictured, the King and Queen attending a state banquet at the Bellevue Palace in Berlin, hosted by Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the German president, and his wife, Elke. Now, Kevin, I know you're not a royalist, as we know, but is it important, do you think, for European relations that these visits take place?
Yeah, it's soft power. Schultz raised Brexit 6 years ago. It was set in motion. So no, I think it really does matter. Now, I think we could do it in other ways, probably better ways, cheaper ways. But if you've got a monarchy, you might as well use it. And of course, we have a very European, Germanic monarchy. Until the First World War, in the middle of it, it was the House of Saxe, Coburg, and Gotha that had changed its name to Windsor. So he's gone to see his relatives as well, hasn't he?
Sarah?
Yes, I mean, state dinners are extraordinary occasions. They're sort of mad, completely bonkers. I actually went to one once, and it was the maddest evening of my life. They're very formal. Everything is done within sort of very clear, sort of tight parameters. So there's no margin for error, and they do achieve what they're meant to achieve, which is that they make the guests feel very valued and feted. I suppose that, and I think this particular, I mean, it's a shame that he didn't get to go to France, because I do think that rebuilding a few bridges with our European neighbours is not a bad idea, and I think he's probably just the right man to do it.
Sarah Vine.
I know that
Kevin
Kevin...
Maguire. No, we know about him. Don't worry. He's always been like that.
He knows what happened in France in the past, and he'll be a bit worried.
Kevin, we've run out of time, I have to say. Anyway, lovely to see you both. Thank you very much indeed.